Everybody, good morning. Good morning. So we thought, some of us we met a few months ago, and we thought it would be great to do something a little bit different. It would be great to get some of our communities together, and we also wanted to try to see if we could create a worship and event that was a bit bigger than what we're normally used to. So we weren't sure that normally in Lancaster Gate we have about 100 people often on a Sunday, and this is about 200 seats available in here. I don't know how many people are in the alcove. And we thought, well, it'd be nice to invite all the congregations in London, but we thought, well, before we invite those people south of the river, Bromley and South London, we better see what we can do north of the river. So well done. I think we can definitely invite them to something, all of us. What do you think? Yeah? So, in about 7 years' time, it's 2020, and it will be a significant year for our unification movement because it's going to be the 100th anniversary of the birth of our founder. And our movement would like to commemorate internationally that day, and it would be really nice if those of us who meet here locally in our communities would be able to put something on the altar, something of the fruits that have been born out of the 7 years leading up to that date from our life. And when I was thinking about what would it take for the next 7 years to be different from the last 7 years, I was thinking, well, that's a difficult question, isn't it? But one thing that came to my heart was that actually, probably one of the most crucial things will be how much each of us have a deeper sense of our calling in life. What is your calling for your life? What is it that you sense that you were born to do, that you were created to bring to this world? That's our topic for today. Working out how we can use our talents, our abilities for a bigger vision than just maybe our own life, that earning our money and getting a house and so forth. Figuring out how we're called to serve, and figuring out how there might be a way in which God is trying to call us in our life to something. Yeah, events like this are great for maybe getting us all on the same page, maybe even reading the same book. And at the end of the message, I want to read you a few quotes from a book that I really recommend you all read. It's called Home Church. It's by Reverend Moon. It's if you go to unification.net and you just scroll down, you'll see a hyperlink in blue, and it will say Home Church. And the whole book is there. You can read it on your phone, on your iPad, on your Samsung Galaxy, or on your desktop. And but we'll come to that at the end of the service. But like I said, events like this are good for getting us on the same page and maybe reading the same book. But a good Sunday service attendance doesn't get us necessarily to where we want to get to. It doesn't necessarily get us to heaven, does it? Yeah? Anyone agree with that? Yes? Some of you strongly, I think, yeah? You know, I invited one brother here who's in my congregation. He was just getting into a car with someone. I said, haven't seen you for ages. It'd be great to see you on Sunday. He said, sorry, I can't come. I'm just way too busy visiting churches and visiting people. And he had me dumbfounded. I said, great answer. But it'd be great. Anyway, there's more to say, but that was a really good answer, I thought. But we need, don't we, to go with our worship time. We need social action. And actually, that's why we wanted to, out of what we're doing here with this really big service, is experiment and explore a bit. And we wanted to put some causes and organizations that some of you are involved in out there in the alcove, just to show what people are involved in, but also to give others a chance to get involved in some of those things and to connect what we do out there, what some of us already have found as our calling, to what we are doing here. And we also, something we're discovering in my congregation is we also need to find a way to turn our homes into churches. You know, many of us meet in congregations that don't get much bigger and don't get much smaller. They kind of tend to stay the same. Anyone in this room go to a congregation like that? Yeah? Yeah? Not many. Okay, well, I do. That's the way I perceive it. And since I used to hang out on Wimbledon Common as a teenager, drinking with my friends on a Friday night throughout the summer, and the Saturday night, and a Sunday night, and sometimes a Monday night, even from then, I always had a kind of passion, not a kind of passion, I really had a passion in my heart for community. And then it was just looking at the community that sat on Wimbledon Common and trying to figure out why there were lots of different groups and why they couldn't come together and why sometimes we used to have organized fights after school and instead of really being together and etc. And as a consequence, I didn't get to stay so long at that school, but that feeling of commitment to community always stayed with me. It's what grabbed me when I met this movement. And so, if you have a passion about something, then, like for example, I have this passion for community. When I'm in a community that's essentially static, that's not getting bigger or smaller, I start to feel uncomfortable. I start to realize that it frustrates me. Is there something in your life that you're passionate about that because of the way it is, it frustrates you, it makes you feel uncomfortable? And when I have that feeling, I start to wonder how things could be different, could be changed. And actually, that's essentially how, when Jeff and myself sat down and some others, we got to this idea of meeting like this. We don't normally meet here. We don't normally meet all together. We don't have the projector that we have in our hall across the road. We don't have the lights or the things that we used to having there. And we don't have the problems that we have here. I mean, this room got booked as a conference, unfortunately. So when they heard the music, they weren't really too happy. But I've been seeing a few people putting their heads through the door and then smiling. So maybe that's okay. But when I get that kind of feeling that I'm uncomfortable about something, I feel like I have to find answers, don't you? I have to find solutions. And I don't always look diligently enough, carefully enough, wisely enough. But at least I can say, I'm looking. I'm searching. So, coming back to this theme of having a calling in your life, having a sense of vocation for your life. It's a question we all get asked early on, isn't it? Basically, since we can start to speak, and parents and teachers and family friends, and they look down at you and they say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And normally you're way too young to have too much of a sense or an answer. I gave it a go at breakfast this morning. I said to Eddie, so what do you want to be, Eddie, when you grow up? Just out of the blue. And he said, a footballer. I said, okay, well, who do you want to play for? And he looked shocked that I didn't obviously know. And he said, Manchester United, Man United, of course. And then I asked him, why? And he said, Because of the money. And I said, and maybe you like playing football? Yeah, of course, I like playing football, but you can get really, really, really rich. And I asked another one of my sons what he wants to be, and he spoke about it. And anyway, sometimes you need to keep, if people are in the room, you need to, maybe I'll stop there, because he's here. When people think about what they want to do these days, I think a lot of people think about how much money they're going to make, it seems. Recently, in the media, they've been talking about the plight of young people growing up in London, the economics of it, that they're saying that they have to choose between buying a house or having a family, that they can't have both. That if they want to have a family, they'll maybe have to stay with their parents because buying a house is going to become unaffordable. You know, they make all these, I think, sometimes slightly obscure, sometimes silly financial calculations based on how it's going to be for people. But that's what they're saying some young people are trying to decide about, whether to have a house or to try and have a family. You know, the question you get asked when you're small is, what do you want to do? When you become a teenager or when you're in your early 20s, maybe some of you who have grown up, you experience someone saying, I want to have a talk with you about your future. Anyone ever had that from someone older than them in their teenage years or their early 20s? I had it many times. One of the office I'm working in part-time at the moment, there's a young man there in his early 20s. He said, I've got to go for lunch with my granddad. He wants to talk about my future. And he was running around the office trying to get lots of good ideas that he could stick in front of his grandfather. And this pressure to become a certain kind of person. And so I don't know how it is for you, those of you who go out every day in the week to work. But are you someone who essentially sees their work as a job to make money so that you can get to the weekend? Is the work you do in your job, essentially, that's its only value? So you've got enough money to have a holiday and enjoy the weekend. You're one of these people that says, thank God, thank goodness it's Friday. They used to have a TV program called that. Yeah, thank you, David. And then there's some people, what you could call careerists, people who simply, they feel their main motivation is to get to the top of the ladder, that they want to be able to get the highest position in the company, that's their driving motivation and driving force. That actually the substance of their work doesn't interest them so much. Getting the accolades and the best share options is what really inspires them. And then there's the lucky ones of us who find a vocation. That the work you do, you'd actually do it for its own sake. You almost feel like you do it even if you didn't get paid. Almost. Yeah. That the prestige, the money is secondary to the joy of being able to use the talents that were your birthright, the things that you were given at birth, and to combine that with your passion to do something in the world that you can also earn a living with. That you feel like you're affecting the greater good. I found a nice little thing on the internet about the etymology of vocation versus career. I haven't researched it too much, so I hope this is right. It's quite revealing. The word vocation comes from the Latin word vocare, or to call. It denotes a voice summoning a person to a unique purpose. The word career derives from the Latin word for cart and the Middle French word for racetrack. Do you see where this is going? It denotes quickly moving in a circle, never getting anywhere. So I don't know if any of you are sort of a bit middle-aged like me or older, you can remember what it was that you wanted to do when you were young. I've just got a couple of things that stick in my mind. I remember wanting to become a wine wholesaler. I remember sitting in a cafe in France and seeing this guy just chatting to the cafe owner, and my dad spoke French, so he explained to me what they were talking about. I thought, that's great. You go out into the countryside, you buy up all this wine from the vineyards, and you go around the cafes, sitting around with the cafe owners, delivering the wine, drinking it with the cafe owners. I thought, that sounds like a good job. That's what I thought when I was about 12, 13. And then I went to university and I studied English literature, which unfortunately just tends to open things up rather than focus you in to clear options. And then I used to sit around with my friends in Newcastle, and we had a vision of opening a cafe where we all DJ'd and basically didn't sit around necessarily drinking wine, but listening to each other's music. But none of these things were really, I think, more than just a sort of a light-hearted dream. You know, some people seem to know from quite a young age what they want to do. But for many of us, it takes many years to find out what we are really meant to do. So I don't know where you are on that journey right now. You may even be 70 years old and still on that journey, and I think that's okay. You may be 15 or 18 and already have a clear sense. That's also okay. I know when I talk to some of you, you're passionate about your work. I know when I speak to some of you, you've changed jobs or you've gone on at a later age in life to study, to find a new path in life. And I think that's really inspiring when people have that kind of courage and get up and go. But some of us are just struggling to find a job, to put enough food on the table. And if you're someone who believes that God takes an interest in your life, then that brings a whole nother dimension to your calling, your purpose, doesn't it? And so the problem with that, I find, I don't know if you experience this, but when I start to try and think about my calling in the context of what God is calling me to do, it's very easy to get stumped, to get stuck. Just the very thought of thinking about it almost becomes stifling. It just sometimes feels like too big a thing to have the time to really sit down and work out and have a feeling for. So whatever your situation this morning, in sense of your calling, it's good to always review and take another look and ask yourself some difficult questions and challenge yourself about where you're being called to go in your life. And to do this, I want us to look at the first book of Samuel. We're going to do some different readings from the first 3 chapters, and I'm a bit worried because that's quite a lot to get through, and it might be ill-advised, but we'll do our best. And the reason I wanted to do this was because I was reading this about a month ago, and when I started to think about finding our calling, actually this story came to me. It's a story that starts with someone who feels completely empty. They feel a great void in their life. They're ridiculed, they're frustrated, and they're really hopeless. But out of that circumstance, out of that hopelessness comes an amazing thing happens, that someone finds a calling out of that. That out of that situation, more than one person finds themselves in the deepest, truest sense. And it starts with a woman called Hannah. So if you've got your Bible with you, presumably not in a book form by the looks of it, but maybe you could grab it on your phone, or I think we've got 3G in here. And I've cut out a few verses just to keep it down, but we'll start at the beginning of Samuel. Are you ready? Yeah? There was, and excuse my pronunciation sometimes, there was a certain man from Ramathaim, whose name was Elkanah. He had 2 wives. One was called Hannah, and the other Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah had none. Year after year, this man went up from his town to worship and sacrifice to the Lord Almighty at Shiloh. Whenever the day came for Elkanah to sacrifice, he would give portions of the meat to his wife Peninnah and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah, he gave a double portion because he loved her. And the Lord had closed her womb. Because the Lord had closed Hannah's womb, her rival, that's talking about this other wife, Peninnah, her rival kept provoking her in order to irritate her. This went on, like the journey up to make the offering, year after year. Whenever Hannah went up to the house of the Lord, her rival provoked her till she wept and could not and would not eat. So I know how some people are about going to church. I mean, someone says one wrong word to them. That's pretty much it for a good couple of months. Any of you been like that? Just thought, well, how dare they talk to me like that? Or how dare they ask me why I haven't been recently, and that's it. Yeah, or someone says something to irk you, and you decide you're not coming for a while. Hannah, every time she goes, she gets ridiculed and persecuted, and yet she goes again and again up to make the offering. So as we go through, I mean, I've done my work on this, but you've got to kind of do your work and try to think about what are the lessons in this about finding our calling and finding our place in this world. So maybe some of you have felt persecuted and downtrodden like Hannah. Maybe you felt it as a family or as a community. The point to where you just feel all your confidence is knocked out of you. That it takes all your energy away, these things that people are saying to you. So her husband, when he saw her like this, her husband Elkanah would say to her, "Hannah, why are you weeping? Why don't you eat? Why are you downhearted? Don't I mean more to you than 10 sons?" You know, to have someone in your life, like Hannah does, like her husband, Elkanah, is a real blessing. To have someone in your life when you're downtrodden and you're hopeless and you're frustrated, he tries to reassure her that he loves her whatever happens. You know, that's how I think, not thinking about ourselves right now, but thinking about another person that you may know, or maybe in your family or a friend. If you want to help somebody with their calling, just show them that you really love them. In her deep anguish, Hannah prayed to the Lord, weeping bitterly. So she's reached a breaking point. She's reached the point where things have come to a head. She can't cope on her own anymore. So what does she do? She takes her burden to God. She goes to tell God in no uncertain terms about how she feels. She takes it to God. And then this is what she says. "And she made a vow, saying, 'Lord Almighty, if you will, only look on your servant's misery and remember me, and not forget your servant, but give her a son. Then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life.'" She's saying if she gets a son, she's going to offer him up to God. "And no razor will ever be used on his head." And as she kept on praying, this wasn't a short prayer, I don't think. As she kept on praying to the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was praying in her heart, and her lips were moving, but her voice was not heard. Can you picture that? And Eli, the priest, was sitting by the doorpost of the church, looking across. Eli thought she was drunk and said to her, just imagine someone saying this to you when you're pouring out your soul to God. How long are you going to stay drunk? Put away your wine. Yeah? That's what the priest says to her. Again, I don't know how you would cope with that if you're in my church. If, as the pastor, I come up to you and misunderstand you that badly. Anyway, she's a strong woman. Not so, my lord, Hannah replied. I am a woman who is deeply troubled. I have not been drinking wine or beer or any Bacardi Breezer or anything else. I was pouring out my soul, she says, to the Lord. Do not take your servant for a wicked woman. I have been praying here out of my great anguish and grief. Eli answered, and he gives her his blessing. Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked of him. And she replies, may your servant find favor in your eyes. And then she went her way and ate something. She started eating. It's a good sign. And her face was no longer downcast. So something's changed through this prayer. And then, little details, but notice them. Early in the next morning, they arose and worshipped. Early in the morning, they worshipped God. They went before the Lord, and then they went back to their home at Ramah. And this is a lovely line. Elkanah made love to his wife, Hannah, and the Lord remembered her. So in the course of time, Hannah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel, saying, because I asked the Lord for him. So Samuel sounds like the Hebrew word for being heard by God. So I don't know, maybe you're thinking, Simon, this story sounds more like someone who calls on God that is being called by God. But actually, this is just the first episode. This is just the first phase. And if we think about what we've heard, Hannah's already taught us a lot about what it means to be able to find our calling in life, to find out what we're really meant to be doing. She's taught us the importance of expressing, at least to ourselves and of course also to God, what's really in our heart, to being clear about our strongest emotions. She's got a candid passion in the way that she prays to God. She doesn't just accept her reality, but she seeks for more, even when it seems like there is no more. Yeah? Every year she's been going up there, but nothing was really happening. So, sometimes we look at, in our culture today, at the celebrities, at the super successful, the super rich, the famous, and we think about how maybe they're the ones who are really blessed and chosen and called. They're the ones who can buy what they want, who have the real power in this world. If they want to buy themselves a Premier League football club, they can. If they want to buy a ticket into space, they can. They want to spend several £1 million on their wedding, like Mr. Eccleston's daughter recently, they can. And we maybe then think that ourselves, that in comparison, we're not called to anything particularly great. Okay, maybe my faith tells me there's something great that I believe in, but I'm not called to be or do anything particularly significant. The interesting thing, actually, is that most people who get to the top in life realize that the thing that we all have in common in terms of a calling, the thing that we all share as a calling, is that we're all called to serve in life. Whatever we do, if we only have what seems like a mere job or a rat race career, we're still called to serve in that place, to serve our customers and serve our our fellow workers. And you know, when you see the story of Bill Gates, this person who becomes this high-tech Goliath in the world, and he gets to the top of his ladder, and many of his co-workers who get to the top with him. I remember listening to a program on Radio 4 where some of his colleagues were talking about the moment that they realized that there was almost nowhere further for them to go. But actually the real place for them to go was to realize they had a calling to serve. With all that money they had, they could do amazing things. And of course, that's what Bill Gates went on to do. And many other people who've experienced that. So that's the beautiful truth about finding a calling, is that we all share in a common calling to serve. It's just, can we bring ourselves in our life to really serve in the place that we are in? Even Jesus said, I did not come to be served, but to serve. So let's go back to our story, and this is where Hannah teaches us our next lesson, because you remember that prayer where she makes this vow, she makes a deal with God, and promising her son to God in the middle of a passionate prayer. It's easy to do things in the moment of passion. It's sometimes easy to say big things to God when we're praying, but to carry them out subsequently, to follow it through to the very end, it's not as easy, is it? Maybe, like me, you've experienced that you haven't always been able to keep those promises you've made to God as much as you would have liked to when you made them. But yet that's exactly what Hannah does. So when her husband Elkanah went up with all his family to offer the annual sacrifice to the Lord and to fulfill his vow, Hannah did not go. She said to her husband, after the boy is weaned, when I finish breastfeeding him, I will take him up and present him before the Lord, and he will live there always. So she seems still pretty clear about this promise, but yet she wants to take some time with her son. She doesn't want to traipse up, I don't know what it is, a mountain or a 3-day journey to this temple of God at this point. She wants to spend some time alone with her son. So there's a commitment in her heart. She's been true to her original promise, not just because she's promised it to God. She's been true to herself. You know, how easy it is for you and I to really be true to ourselves. It's coming from within her. Do you remember she said she poured out her whole soul in that prayer? And so through that, she came to a real understanding of who she was. And so when she goes up, when her son is weaned, she took the boy with her, young as he was, along with a 3-year-old bull, an ephah of flour and a skin of wine, and brought him to the house of the Lord of Shiloh. When the bull had been sacrificed, they brought the boy to Eli, and she said to him, and so this is the priest that she hasn't seen since that moment he accused her of being drunk. And here she is coming back after asking him to give his blessing to her. And she comes back a different woman with a newfound confidence. This is what she says, "Pardon me, my Lord, as surely as you live. I am the woman who stood here beside you, praying to the Lord. I prayed for this child, and the Lord has granted me what I asked for. So now I give him to the Lord for his whole life. He will be given over to the Lord." And he, I imagine Samuel, meaning Samuel, worshipped the Lord there. So she then goes on and she prays. She hands her son over to the priest to be raised there, and then she prays to God. And you can see now a different quality in her prayer, a sense of belief and faith and strength through what she's been through. Then Hannah prayed and said, "My heart rejoices in the Lord. In the Lord my strength is lifted high. My mouth boasts over my enemies, for I delight in your deliverance. There is no one holy like the Lord. There is no one besides you. There is no rock like our God. Do not keep talking so proudly or let your mouth speak such arrogance. For the Lord is a God who knows, and by his deeds, deeds are weighed. The bows of the warriors are broken, but those who stumble are armed with strength. He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the ash heap. He seats them with princes and has them inherit a throne of honor." So you can see why Elkanah, why her husband loves her so much. She's a really passionate woman. Yeah. And so each year, before they go up, she prepares a tunic for her son as he's growing up away from home. And she brings it to him, a new garment every year. And through this continued faithfulness, God blesses her with many more children. But then something very special happens, and this is really the point I want to get to, which is that though Samuel is growing up there, are you hot in here? Though Samuel is growing up in this holy place, there's actually a lot of corruption going on around him. So you would kill me if I included all those readings in the message today. So I've left them out. But go and read them. So there's a moment when Samuel is lying down at night and he hears the priest, Eli, calling him. So this is what happens. The boy Samuel ministered before the Lord under Eli the priest. In those days, here's where you can also tell that there's not a lot going on with God. Ever feel like that? There's not a lot going on with God? Anyway, this is what's happening here. It says, in those days, the word of the Lord was rare. There was not many visions. But one night, Eli, whose eyes were becoming so weak that he could barely see, was lying down in his usual place. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the house of the Lord where the ark of God was. Then when God called Samuel, Samuel answered, "Here I am." And he ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." So here's someone getting called literally by God. Maybe some of you experienced this, something similar. Maybe not with a priest, but in some similar kind of way, kind of type of experience. But Eli said, "I did not call, go back and lie down and let me go back to sleep." So he went and lay down again. And again the Lord called, "Samuel!" And Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am. You called me." "My son," Eli said, "I did not call you. Go back and lie down." Now Samuel did not yet know God. The word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. What does that mean? That's something I think to reflect on. What's being said there? Then Eli realized that the Lord was calling the boy, because he's been a priest all his life. He's had maybe many experiences like this. So Eli told Samuel, "Go and lie down, and if he calls you, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.' Don't come running back to me this time. Just stay there. Stay there with God." You know, sometimes maybe that's what some of us need to do more, rather than going talk to another person or going to get an advice from another person. We just need to stay and find God where we are in our situation. And so the Lord came after Samuel went to lie down again. The Lord came and stood there, calling as the other time, "Samuel, Samuel." Then Samuel said, "Speak, for your servant is listening." You know, if we're going to have a calling, we're going to have to be able to listen as well. Listen for it. And it's unlikely to come maybe listening here. It's probably much more likely to come from listening in here. And the Lord said to Samuel, and I'll just give you the first line of what he says, but it's a great line. "See, I'm about to do something in Israel." God hasn't spoken to anyone around here for a long time, and he comes to Samuel and he says, "I'm about to do something here that will make the ears of everyone tingle." It's going to do something big so that their ears are shocked at what they hear. So this young man becomes an agent of God in Israel, that God speaks through him, that people are guided through him. He leads people spiritually in God's nation. He comes into a truly powerful and significant calling for his life. And it all started with a woman who was downtrodden and hopeless and persecuted. So here are the virtues that got us to this place where God is able to speak to someone in the way he spoke to Samuel. There was a passion in the mother of Samuel. Actually, most of the virtues start with her, and I guess in some way are transmitted to her son, because she has passion. She has love from her husband. She has an honesty about how she feels. She has a willingness, they do as a family, have a willingness to offer something to God. We're going to, we said it's the really big service, and we thought it'd be great later when we have our offering song to have a really big offering. What do you think? And there's a sacrifice, the virtue of sacrifice, that she doesn't just ask God for something. She tells God, "I want this, but I'm willing to give myself." And if we really want to find our calling, I think we have to be willing to give ourselves in a way that's just not ordinary. There's a steadfastness in her promise. There's a commitment and attendance and an attitude of service. All these things, you get the feeling, are passed on to her son. So I don't know what you feel, but I believe a lot of our calling comes from our ancestors, comes from our parents. You know, one thing I discovered in my life of faith is that building a deeper relationship with my parents is one of the best things that I could do for my life of faith. They don't even believe in God. They're not particularly into the whole idea of people believing in God. But there's something about our parents, whatever they may be like, that is very much connected to discovering our calling in life. And so I want to finish just bringing us to where we are today in our movement, thinking about this special commemorative day that the Unification Movement wants to celebrate in 2020, the 100th anniversary of our founder, our true father. You know, when I read these words from this book that I spoke about, Home Church, that you can see on unification.net, just about 8 lines down in blue, it's a hyperlink. When I read True Father's words about Home Church, I see actually he has just the same passion and kind of frustration and that you see in Hannah, wanting life to come into her life, wanting a son. I see this same feeling when Father talks about Home Church. It's like the son he wants to see born, the longing he wants to have fulfilled. So here are his words about that. And if you look at his speeches around that time, it seems to be in the late 70s, early 80s, almost all he's talking about. He says in 1979, on the 1st of July, all men want to have a destiny with God, but I want you to know that God has already set the appointment to meet you in home church. God is waiting for you in your home church area. Jesus is there, and so is the kingdom of heaven. Everything you have ever been craving for is there in your neighborhood. I am out there. Don't come here to meet me, he says, but go to your neighborhood. Go to your home church. In 1981, 2 years later, he says, this year's motto on the 1st of January, he says, this year's motto is, home church is my kingdom of heaven. He's been talking about it for 2 years. For some reason, he feels like he's got to carry on saying the same thing. Why is that? Why would you keep repeating yourself for 2 years? Anyone? Sorry? It's important? Yeah, but still, I would get annoyed if someone kept repeating something to me for 2 years, even if it was important. Why? Why do you think he keeps repeating it? Huh? Parents have to, yeah. Especially parents have to repeat things because children don't listen, do they? Home church is my kingdom of heaven, he says. As I already said, in the past 2 years, home church was not that very near or personal to you. So far, you've thought of home church as a kind of witnessing technique or an innovation of the unification church. But it is simply the heavenly way. Home church is your personal affair. It doesn't belong to anyone else. It doesn't belong to other people. It is your personal matter on earth and in heaven, not the unification churches. And then again he says, home church is truly our gospel, an amazing blessing from God. Through home church, you can find and restore everything. There you meet God, the Messiah, Cain and Abel, all the historical missions. You can meet them there. It is really a wonder world. Let's finish with a bit of Oasis. So, that passion that Hannah has, our founder, our true father has about home church, it's connected to this sense of our calling is about finding our way to serve. You know, the best place for us to serve is where we live, where we go every day. So if we're thinking about some big plan for the next 7 years, let's stop thinking about that. Let's stop thinking about a big plan and think about what am I being called to do in these next 7 years. I couldn't think of 7 years. For the last few weeks, I decided to try to make a plan for the next 3 years. Make a plan that maybe God can then work through for the next year or 3 years or 7 years if you're really good at forward planning. But this event that we're having today is because we wanted to create something that might help be a vehicle for that. Next time we might maybe have a sermon. Maybe we'll just have some amazing testimonies from some of you. Maybe we'll let God speak that way. But we don't want to set this event in stone. Maybe we won't have it here next time, especially if they think it's only meant to be a conference in the lobby. Maybe next time we might already feel like inviting Bromley and South London. I think after we'd like to find out from you. We'll find a way to find out from you. But let's find our own calling and find a way once a month or every so often to come together. But let's start to make our homes our churches and see how God starts to show us our calling in that way. It's not easy to do. I just want to finish with this. It's not easy to do. I had a slightly similar experience to Hannah that, just finish with this, that last year earlier this year and last year, I went through something that was really heavy on me, a really big burden. I thought I was, I really, reading back on my diary, it's pretty desolate. And it's gone out of my life now. I'm glad But I made a promise back then because I said, God, if I really want to do something in my neighborhood. I want to start something with my neighbors. I'd love to start having a scriptural reading with my neighbors, and if only I could get rid of this burden, I'd have the energy to do it. That burden went away, but I tell you where I've got to. I've spoken to one of my neighbors on the train about it. I've spoken to another neighbor as they got out of the car. I bought the invitation cards for it, but they're not delivered yet. It's not easy to keep your promise to God. Let's pray. Father, we come in front of you as a community, as a family, as brothers and sisters, and we ask you to bless our hearts with your wisdom and your voice this morning, that you can speak into our hearts about our lives. And that's a different message for every heart, because every heart here is unique and special. Every heart here is being created by you for a particular path, a particular mission. When we think about our vocation, about our workplace, about the job that we do, 9 to 5, 5 or 6 days a week, we wonder how your calling can come into that place. Maybe we just need to write a birthday card for someone in the office who doesn't normally get one. But Heavenly Father, speak to us about how to find our vocation in life, to bring our passion and our talents together. Please share with us through the rest of this afternoon. I pray these things, and we want to pray together now for a few minutes, Heavenly Father. Please listen to the prayers that people speak here now. They're not drunk, Heavenly Father, I promise you. No one's, I don't think, has had anything to drink, but please listen to their prayers as they speak to you now before we have our offering. Amen. Arju. Let's pray together.